welcome back to another episode of Tech Talk. I'm your host, Jeff Hootselle. I'm the Chief Cloud Officer at Auditmacs. As you guys know, Tech Talk is a show. We talk to IT leaders and subject matter experts, folks that are doing really interesting things in the world of technology today. Let you guys hear more about their mission and their brand and some of their views on some of the technologies that are really taking the market by storm. We've always got great guests on the show. Today is no difference. Today we're joined by Kirk Hay. Kirk is the CIO from Jack Cooper Transport Company. Kirk, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us from Kansas City.
No, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So Kirk, for folks that may not be familiar with Jack Cooper, tell them a little bit about the company and kind of what you guys do.
Sure. We are one of the largest auto haulers on the planet, actually, but we do quite a bit of work with all the major automotive manufacturers, especially the U.S.-based, throughout North America. Our primary business, or majority of our business, is delivering new cars and trucks, picking them up plants, ports, railheads, and delivering them to the dealerships. So if you've bought or leased a new car or truck in the last few years, there's a very good chance that we touched it.
That's great. Now, it's funny, you see the trucks out on the road, the giant car carriers, and you see that. You don't necessarily naturally lend towards thinking about technology, but there is a lot of technology and logistics behind that. I know you guys have made some big investments in kind of the mobility technology and also in analytics. Talk a little bit about what strides you guys have made there and really how technology has played a big role in your mission and what you guys are doing today.
Sure. Two aspects. One of them is the logistics aspect of the business, trying to get the most efficiency we can out of a load and to minimize our empty miles. With our equipment, if you've seen car haulers going down the highway, and next time you're on their highway, you'll probably notice a lot more of them now that we've talked about this. You'll notice that they pretty much can only haul things with wheels, as we like to call it. And so getting, when one of our drivers is out making a delivery in a more remote area, it can be difficult to get him freight coming back to fill it up. So we do a lot of work with that. We're trying to develop our transportation network so that when a driver goes from point A to point B, he can pick up another load near point B at least, if not at point B, and head back home. So we spend quite a bit of time running constant solutions all day long with optimization for that, but also with technology to help us optimize the load to make sure we get the most vehicles possible on each truck and trying to minimize the number of stops so that we have appropriate revenue to cover the full length of haul. And with a very dynamic inventory, the inventory is changing by the minute, especially at plants that run 24/7. That can be quite a challenge. So we spend a lot of time and effort in that area. The other side of the business that we've really, during COVID, have actually accelerated or put even more focus on is what we call putting actionable information in people's hands. And that's a pretty broad statement, but what it really covers is giving them information they can make decisions on in a real-time fashion and delivering it securely and putting it literally in their hand with a mobile device. Whether it's a driver in the cab, a mechanic in the shop, whether it's a yard person, because we will inventory and manage yards where there's several thousand vehicles sometimes in a particular yard. And, being able for them to go through and see what the real-time inventory is, which vehicles have been approved for shipment and where they're going. Not every vehicle that comes out of the plant has the destination when it comes out of the plant, because it may have not been sold to a consumer or even to a dealership yet. So when I talked earlier about our solutions for building loads, that is very, very dynamic. The freight changes every minute. If we run the solution right now and then we run it again in 5 minutes, we may get a different result. And that solution also takes in consideration where our drivers are geographically, where they will be in 2, 3, 4 hours, or maybe tomorrow, so we can start planning their next loads, and also takes in consideration how many hours do they have left to drive by DOT standards for that day, for that week, for that 72-hour period, and what the available delivery times are at the dealership. So, some folks may think, well, that's, it's a simple math problem. It is in concept, a
couple variables in there,
except the variables change. The variables continuously change.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and you're not even talking about the factor of just the adoption side, right? So if you're putting these mobile devices in the hands of folks and giving them all these new applications and program, you've also got to get from the people aspect of it, get them to adopt it, get them to use it, get them to understand it, and then support that infrastructure as well. Talk about that side of it. I mean, that's a lot of infrastructure to support and a lot of folks to have to educate on new services. How have you guys approached that?
Yeah, that's a great point. We have for a company our size, we have a lot of mobile devices. We have probably, when I include all the variations on tablets and phones, we have over 3,000 mobile devices, which is more devices than we have employees.
Sure.
And then for a company our size, we have a large number of locations, and they range greatly. Some of them are just a few people, some of them are hundreds of people at a location. So our network is very large. It requires, a lot of resiliency, a lot of sustainability, not just, as far as performance goes, but also, during the winter. We have locations that up in Canada, they're exposed to extreme temperatures and snowstorms, East Coast ice storms, Kansas City area and a little further south, we get ice storms. And we have locations in Florida where we have to worry about hurricanes and things like that. So, it needs constant care and feeding, so to speak. But trying to deliver that technology is one aspect. Adoption is another challenge with so many locations and such a hectic pace, especially at locations that are adjacent or on a plant property for Ford or GM or Chrysler or what have you. Having that dedicated time to train them on new technology is a little bit of a challenge. So we end up doing a lot of in-person training when we can, maybe regionally or as we make stops. We try to get the IT team, we try to make sure that we get folks out into terminal locations, we call them terminals, into our locations a few times a year per person. And while we're there, we take advantage of new training or updating training and, of course, gaining business knowledge. I think that's the most important thing for my team, quite honestly, is making sure they experience what the folks at the terminal experience so they can help them with solutions.
Yeah, I think that's it. And you're smart there. I think it's the adoption standpoint of being in the field, being at the ground level, really understanding what those guys are doing, in their jobs and how they interact with technology is great. It's one thing to kind of think about it from an IT department in the lab and put all these things together and all the variables and work that goes on by that, but to actually translate that into the user experience, the adoption side of it is a big thing. So it sounds like you guys are doing some amazing stuff with that. So as you guys are kind of coming out of the COVID pandemic now, we're starting to see some restrictions lifted and business kind of slowly getting back to normal. Yeah, how's that changed things? Kind of your plans for 2020 and where the company is focused on for the next, the remainder of this year and into next year. What are kind of your priority shift been like as a CIO?
Yeah, as soon as in March in Kansas City area where I am, they started to do the lockdown towards the end of March. Once that hit, we realized, maybe we should have realized it sooner. I don't know. Hey, this is going to be a while. We're not going to be back in the offices and back at our locations in just 10 days. We knew that. So we started thinking about, okay, let's start planning for what happens when we do restart, when we start to reopen facilities. The plant sites, as you've probably been reading the paper, the major manufacturers have reopened their plants and are trying to ramp up as fast as possible, trying to get back to 3 shifts, in 24/7 at locations where they need to, especially trucks and SUVs, the most popular vehicles. So our plant sites and our locations, our terminals, most of them are ramping up very quickly as far as people coming back and having to practice PPE, wearing PPE and safe practices, social distancing and everything, and taking it very, very seriously. And then we have the office locations where people, for the most part, are able to work remotely. A lot of our folks did work remotely, at least on a part-time basis. A lot of people traveled heavily, so that wasn't a big departure. So once we settled that down and took care of all the telecommuting, we started realizing that our goal of putting actionable information in people's hands was directly in line with COVID. Because if you're giving people the information they need on a mobile device, they're not in the terminal as often. They can be out in the field, out in the yard, at the loading ramp. The greatest example is our drivers. if the driver can spend more time in his cab on his mobile device as opposed to having to go into the office, into the terminal to drop off something or to check with their manager or what have you, we get social distancing by default. We dramatically improve their safety, and they're more efficient and they're happier, because being a truck driver is a very challenging job. Being a car hauler is extremely challenging, loading and unloading that equipment. It's an art form. It's amazing to watch them load and unload the vehicles. But trying to give them as much as we can in their hand in that mobile device is where we strived. And we've done some complicated mobile apps in the last 6 to 8 weeks. We've done some simple ones. We've made a lot more information, a lot more podcasts, a lot more videos, and of course, full-blown apps available to them over the last 6 to 8 weeks to help them not have to come into our terminals if they don't need to.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you guys are doing some amazing stuff. I mean, not just to make the business run better and more efficient and be more profitable, but also just to make that user experience better and safer, it sounds like, as well. So I think it's great. It's great stuff, and kudos to you and your team for all the hard work and stuff you guys have done, for sure. And thank you for sharing it, kind of your story with the staff here. If folks want to find out more about Jack Cooper, I mean, we'll certainly be looking for your carriers on the road, but where else can they go to find out more about the company?
JackCooper.com is one of the best places. And then we also have JackCooperNews.com, where we have a lot of information about COVID and specific things that's targeted mostly for our employees, but also for the public. Most all that content is publicly available.
That's great. Well, Kirk, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thanks for taking some time out to share your story and what you guys are working on. We appreciate it. Hope you stay safe up there.
All right. Thank you. You as well.
All right. Thanks. And thank you guys for joining us for another Tech Talk. We'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode.